Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, Yoga Anatomy for Absolute Beginners. I'm Drew. It's awesome to see you here. So if you're here, you're most likely got a bit of an interest in learning more about the human body and particularly how it relates to yoga practice. So we're going to be exploring this really interesting principle called the SAID principle today. And we use this in physical therapy, rehabilitation as a guiding principle to help direct what we're going to do, and it can absolutely be used in yoga context, either for your personal practice, for your teaching, and also particularly if you're a yoga therapist as well. Very, very important for yoga therapy. So let's dive on in, shall we? Okay, so the SAID principle stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands. In physical rehabilitation and sports training, the SAID principle asserts that the human body adapts specifically to imposed demands. It demonstrates that, given stresses on the human system with biomechanical or neurological, there will be a specific adaptation to the imposed demands. SAID. All right, so it's a fancy way of saying that whatever you're doing in terms of your practice, that's the stimulus that's going to go into the body. And so the body's going to adapt to whatever stimulus you're doing, right? So if you're doing yin yoga, the body's going to adapt very differently to if you're doing like Yenga versus Ashtanga, because the actual practices themselves are quite unique. They're very different in how they practice. The kind of purpose between each practice is very, very different. Yin yoga is orientated specifically at the fascial system. It's really orientated at calming the neurological system down, so really tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system. It also brings in Chinese medicine elements, so we're looking at the energy flow through the channels. Okay, so the meridians live in the fascia or in the fascial planes. So when you're in a shape, you're stretching and tensioning these kind of fascial planes, and you're going to start to liberate chi, which will move down through the connective tissue, which is super cool. So Yin Yoga is very much passive in its exercise. The postures or the shapes are held for a long duration. There's discomfort there, but in discomfort, you're really trying to kind of be relaxed and be calm. But in that way, you're getting this kind of neurological adaptation training effect, not only in the fascial system, but also on the neurological system. So that's going to affect how your stress response is affecting. If we look at more something like an Ashtanga practice, Ashtanga is really well known for being a very strong practice. It's very physical, very challenging asana, uh, very, very high demands in terms of flexibility, strength, stability, mobility. It has this kind of real strong tapas element into it. So you're going to get your heart rate up, you're going to sweat, you're going to be really uncomfortable. It's a very, very challenging asana, depending on how it's structured. So it's more of a physical orientated practice in the asana as well. So it requires a stronger constitution to be able to do the practice. So very, very different. So just in choosing your style of yoga that you're going to practice, it's going to have different adaptations to the body. So what we tend to do is people tend to find the practices that are intuitively suited to their body and their needs. So if someone wants the stress release, they might go more to yin yoga, particularly if they have a lot of stress in their body, a lot of stress in their life, and they're physically tired. So their constitution is quite weak. So a yin practice is starting off with will help them to build up some energy without expending a lot of energy. So yin practice is really good for people who've got decreased constitution or decreased energy at the beginning. Whereas Ashtanga can be really, really good for stress relief as well, particularly if people have a lot of nervous energy, repressed energy that they need to express. So the physical stress of a strong Ashtanga practice that can release and move a lot of energy in the body. So then in that way, we're having the overall goal is the same, stress reduction, but the way it's achieved is different because we're looking at different styles in yoga. So it depends on the body. So there's this kind of thing in yoga world where people say it depends, and it does. It just depends on the individual, where they're at, what they're capable of, their capacity, their experience. All these different things need to be taken into consideration. So it's not just a one bit fits all approach. But when you choose to go to a class, that's very general. So if you go to a yin class or a flow class or a Ashtanga class or whatever class, if you're participating in a class with a group of other people, it's going to have a bit more of a generalist kind of context to it. The more specific you want to get, the more individualized you have to do. So the most specific practice is one that's designed for the one person only. Okay, so every asana, the breath ratios, the energy work, that's all incorporated into the practice is all built into that one individualized practice, and then the person goes away and does their own practice. So that would be more like a yoga therapy type approach, where you're really kind of designing specific individualized practices for somebody, which is cool. Not everyone likes to practice on their own though, so you can still go to like a group yoga class which has a specific theme in mind. So it might be yoga for lower back pain. So then someone's selecting asana specifically to address the common presentations in lower back pain. So yoga can be absolutely amazing to help with lower back pain if done appropriately, but it depends, because some yoga postures, some yoga asana could aggravate people's lower back pain depending on their presentation and what's going on. So it's going to be a little bit of a case, if you're going to a group class which is specifically for lower back pain, there's going to be a group of people you're going to do really well with, just because the asana that is being used is going to be beneficial for that particular manifestation of back pain. But for some folks, it's probably going to irritate them and aggravate them, potentially even exacerbate their back pain. So then they'll self-select and not go. So people tend to self-select to their own practices and the styles that they like. So if we go back to previous video we did on the muscle fiber type, so keep in mind that we have specific muscle fibers in our body, which gives us a more of a genetic preferential kind of leaning towards certain types of exercise and movement. Yoga is definitely going to be more of that slow twitch muscle fiber, endurance based type muscle fiber. So already people are doing yoga, even if they don't really realize it or not, they're probably more suited towards slow twitch muscle fiber exercise, which suits yoga practice. Okay, so it's, those slow twitch fibers, they're more postural orientated, they're oxidative, so they use a lot of oxygen for energy, so they're slow to fatigue, they've got high resistance fatigue, so you can kind of do an hour, 75-minute, 90-minute practice, and it's going to be really suitable for yogi type people. Of course, you can definitely use type 2 fast twitch fiber in yoga. No reason why you couldn't. But just as a general kind of overarching kind of principle, most people will lean towards yoga who do it a lot because their body's suited to it. Because, one slice that puddle is that their muscle fiber makeup is more genetically suited towards it. And that's just kind of how it is. Your same thing with people going to the gym. Some people tend to self-select, and when people are lifting weights, if they have a good mix of type 2 medium fast twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers, they'll just be better adapted to getting stronger and adding on muscular mass and developing speed and power and things like that. So, and that's fine. It's just about understanding your own body, understanding what works for you, understanding the different adaptations and how you respond, and then being very wise about what exercise you choose to do. So for myself, for example, I'm most likely more of a type 1 muscle fiber type guy. I do really well with more endurance-based activity. Whenever I've gone and done stronger, heavy resistance training, it just tires me out. I just get fatigued. Constitutionally, it's just not suited to me. But exercises like endurance-based, like so a long run or a long bike ride, low resistance, high repetition weight training, work really well for me. Yoga, Tai Chi, Yin Yoga, Qigong, these exercise styles really work well for my constitution, my energy, and so I tend to put more time into that. You could make an argument to say, well, you want to balance yourself out, so why not do the stronger strength training stuff? And for me, just personally, I've done that. It just doesn't really work for my body. Having said that, I think it's really important that we develop strength, and strength is very individual, but there are certain benchmarks and certain kind of like must-dos, in my opinion, that if you get to this level in terms of just having a body that works and it's pain-free, if you can do that, it just resolves a lot of problems. So highly recommend doing some kind of strength training, and yoga practice may be your version of strength training. So let's just, for another example of the said principle, let's look at, so like our skeleton man here in Complete Anatomy. If you haven't got this app and you're interested in yoga anatomy, you want to learn more about the muscles, definitely get this app. And in future videos, we're going to be doing a lot of work on looking at all the big muscle groups. But if we look at this muscle here, for example, this is the iliacus. It's a really powerful hip flexor. Okay, so if we're getting specific, this muscle is a hip flexor. It attaches onto the femur. Okay, so it comes from the front of the body. And it's a hip flexor, meaning that when it contracts, it's going to bend the femur up towards the chest. So if we look at the motion, let me find the motion. And models, where are we? Motion, come back, condition. There we go, motion is what we want. So give the computer a second to fire up. Okay, so here we go. We're in hip flexion. So when the muscle contracts, slide across each other, it's pulling on the femur here, and it's lifting the knee up towards your chest. So if you think about any asana where we lift your knee up towards your chest, like so, or if you're in a warrior one, for example, so this is the front knee position. So this is your front leg in warrior one. So this muscle here is creating hip flexion. To stabilize the pelvis, this iliacus will be engaged. Okay. All right, so you're in the warrior one front leg stance position here. Now, if this iliacus and its partner muscle here, the psoas, is tight, like excessively tight, a couple things could happen. Now, they both attach on the lesser trochanter here, which is on the inside of the femur. And if we follow the line of pull of the muscle, so it's going to be pulling up this way, it's going to pull on the inside of the femur here. And that's going to pull the knee inward. So you can kind of imagine that it's going to create this internal pull of the femur into the middle. So these muscles here are pulling up this way, and it's going to pull your femur into the middle a little bit. So that's going to change the orientation of your knee over the toe. Okay. And so it's going to change the loading of the knee joint particularly, and of the ankle joint. Additionally, the iliacus and psoas attaching onto the lumbar spine of the pelvis, if these two muscles are overly tight, it's going to probably tilt the pelvis forward a little bit as well, and that's going to change the orientation of your lumbar spine. So the said principle kind of tells us that if we want to have a really healthy hips, these two muscles here, the iliacus and the psoas, want to be working in a really functional way. So they want to be strong and flexible enough that they can stabilize not only the spine, the pelvis, and the femur. So they're working across the femur, the pelvis, and the spine. They want to have the strength to be able to control those positions. And they also want to have enough flexibility to be able to take the leg through the full range. So if we bring the knee up higher, so let's slide up, come back. So in this diagram here, the knee's stopping at 9 degrees, but in reality, you can bring your knee right up to your chest, and that's hip flexion. So these muscles want to have enough strength to be able to lift the weight of your leg against gravity towards your chest. So we need to train this muscle to be flexible and strong together. one of the kind of gaps in yoga practice is what I see often is we train this muscle to be either too flexible, so you can move the limb through space, no problem, but there's not enough strength in this kind of complex, in this muscle group here. And if there's not enough strength, then the stability has to come from somewhere else, and that might come from the lower back, it might come from accessory muscles around the hip. Something else will have to help to give that stability and movement to the hip flexion. And so then we need to address that. So this could be an example of specific adaptation to implied demands. If you apply that to functional movement in the body, when you understand how each muscle works, and then you understand how they relate into the greater context of the exercise, then you can have a really good understanding of what each asana is trying to do and how to do them correctly. And my job as an exercise physiologist, as a rehab therapist, as a yoga therapist, medical qigong practitioner, to me it's all the same because we're looking at movement. Movement's the same, doesn't matter what you're doing. It's understanding which muscles are going to be active in each position, each asana, each form, and then ensuring that the physical technique is correct and the respiratory breathing is correct. So you're doing each movement correctly. So you're not putting excessive loading into the segments, into the joints, into the spine, into the hips, into the knee, into the ankle. These things can kind of create problems down the track. Postural pain syndromes can manifest. Joint problems can manifest. Wear and tear issues can manifest, like osteoarthritis, those kind of things manifest. I've 25 years of practice and helping people, I've seen it over and over again. So when you clean up your movement and you focus more on quality versus quantity, don't get too tied up on getting overly flexible. You want the flexibility of the strength, then your practice changes. And essentially, a lot of problems just disappear. A lot of niggling injuries, conditions, lower back, hips, knees, ankles, bursitis, tendonitis, all these issues that are kind of connected to poor movement quality just basically disappear. And the reason why they disappear is because you're applying specific adaptations to the body in the way that the body is functionally designed to move. So in my opinion, yoga asana is all about training the physical body just to work really well. So it's not a barrier, it's not an obstacle for other training that you want to do. So remember, classically in yoga, asana is really about preparation for pranayama, and then pranayama is preparation for pratyahara and dharana, and please excuse my horrible Sanskrit pronunciations, and basically meditation, right? So can you sit for long periods of time comfortable, so the pain of not being able to sit isn't a distraction, so you can focus more on meditation and breath work. So you also then training the physical body, so any illnesses, ailments aren't a problem, because when you do regular physical activity, it's like the best medication you can take for just your general health and well-being. And we'll do a video on the benefits of just exercise broadly. But when you look at all the benefits of exercise, it really is one of the best things you can do for your health and well-being. It's so, so powerful, so profound. It's like, why wouldn't you do some form of exercise? And the body needs this. It's just how the body adapts, how the body works. It needs this movement to produce energy, to move all the lymphatic fluid through the system, which is like a sewage, a cleanup process. All these things require exercise. So thinking about what exactly you're doing, on one level, you want to kind of in the back of your mind is like, what's the purpose of this exercise? What's the purpose of this asana? What's the purpose of this position? Why am I breathing like this? So all the why, the what, how questions, these are questions I'm really interested in. And what I've noticed is that a lot of yoga practices are filled with, how do I say, they're filled with a lot of fluff. There's a lot of filler in them. And if you're looking at like, I just want to do the things that really, really are the low hanging fruit, the gives me the best result for my time, the lowest dose, if you will. You can kind of get rid of a lot of the yoga asana stuff. A lot of it's not necessary. It looks good, feels great when you're doing it, and if it looks good and feels great for you and your body, and you've got the time, go at it. Awesome, awesome. Always better to do practice than not practice, right? But if we kind of like look at the principles of movement and the principles of functional movement, we can kind of get rid of some of the asana and just focus on the real key essential ones. I come from a real rehab background. I'm helping people recover from injury and illness. And so we need to be very specific about what we do and get rid of the fluff. So if it's 20 exercises to select from, I'm only picking one or two and getting really, really good at these one or two, because if you get good at these one or two exercises, like Warrior One is a great example. There is so much benefit in the Warrior One. There's probably 20 things that are really beneficial in Warrior One if we break them down, and we'll do that at some stage. If you just do Warrior One, then most of the other standing poses don't really need to be that focused on. I mean, they're great if you can do them, but you're just getting good at Warrior One will have a lot of benefit just on that one posture. Then if you kind of add in like a squat and then a forward fold hinge, that's really the three lower limb exercises all you need to do, because they're ticking the boxes of the primary motor patterns of human movement or the lower limb. You get good at those three, and it'll transfer to all other kind of lower limb movements. So if you understand the movement pattern kind of piece, that's being specific, you're training the pattern, then you get this kind of global effect which will spread out, which is pretty cool to the whole body. So it just comes back down to your personal preference and what you want to do, what you want to achieve. All right, I feel like I've been a bit of a ranty rant, but it's one of my kind of pet bugbears in yoga practice when I go and do classes. There's just so much fluff in there and so much nonsense people are talking about. I'm like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense at all. So when you strip away all that fluff and you kind of get around to like the root of it and the cause of it, you can, in my opinion, you can get rid of a lot of the filler, if you like. If you like the filler, if you like the fluff, then that's awesome. Go for it. Me personally, I don't like it. I don't connect with it. It annoys me when I'm in a class and the teacher's just kind of fluffing on about butterflies and the universe connection and how the prana's flowing through the chakra, blah, 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 blah. Like, all that stuff is, for some people, I know they really connect to it, and it's that kind of tapping into more of that creative side, which is cool. Personally, for me, not my jam. Don't need it. This is probably why I prefer a solo practice versus group classes, unless I can find a group teacher who is more practically orientated. And that comes back down to personal preference. Okay, so thank you guys. How can you support the channel? So we're building up this channel, getting out this knowledge of yoga and asana and what's working, getting rid of the fluff, giving you real kind of things to work on. A couple ways you can help out is just like and subscribe if you'd like this one. Drop a comment down below. Any questions about yoga anatomy, shoot them at me. Always happy to answer them. You can jump over the website. There's lots of different ways you can kind of work with me over there. Courses, coaching, consultation. So yeah, feel free to find all the info over there. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video.